Good morning. This is Tom Morgan from The Leading Edge. Today, I'm joined by my dear friend, Devin Martin, an experienced transformational and psychedelic integration coach. And thanks to an introduction from our mutual friend, Scott Shadian, I'm also joined by Dr. Christopher Bache. He is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Youngstown State University, adjunct faculty at the California Institute of Integral Studies, Emeritus Fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and on the advisory council of Grof Legacy Training. Dr. Bache is perhaps best known for his remarkable 2019 book, LSD and the Mind of the Universe. It relates his insights and experiences from 73 therapeutically structured, massive dose LSD sessions and experiences over the 20 years from 1979 to 1999. I've been revisiting the book in preparation for this interview, and it truly is remarkable, and I would recommend for anyone to read it. Firstly, Dr. Bache, thank you so much for joining us.
It's an honor. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Devin. I look forward to our conversation today.
So if we may kick off, to anyone who hasn't read the book and is listening kind of mouth agape at that introduction, could you just explain sort of why you decided to go after this modality and what you experienced in your sessions?
Well, I was just a junior faculty member, just starting my teaching career in 1978, and I read Stan Grof's Realms of the Human Unconscious, and I knew I had to do this work. It just felt like a life calling. And so I began secretively, privately, a course of LSD therapy following Stan Grof's protocol, and I chose to work with high doses following that protocol. And I kind of took that and pushed it to its limits. And I want to say up front, I do not recommend that people do what I did. If I were doing it over again, I'd do it more gently. I'd be kinder on my body. But what I did about 5 sessions a year. I worked for 4 years. I stopped for 6 years for reasons I did give in the book. And then I resumed for a very intense 10-year period, doing on average about 5 sessions a year, holding it all privately. And then after I finished, I published The Dark Night, Early Dawn, but the full story of the journey, where it went, is in LSD and the Mind of the Universe. And basically what I found is that if you work consistently, internally focused, keep your attention within and confront whatever is emerging within you, first, the personal stuff emerges, and then that takes you through a death and rebirth process, catapulting you into a deeper level of reality. And after working that level of reality and going through the purification processes there, a third and fourth, and for me, a fifth level of reality. And just broadly speaking, I describe these in terms of the personal mind, the collective psyche, archetypal mind, deeper than the collective psyche, causal mind, and then the diamond luminosity. And so that's the journey that I'm describing.
Can you share a little bit about your personality? I'm very intrigued by the type of human being who chooses to take 5 hits of LSD repeatedly. I've dabbled in that realm myself, and I've always thought of myself as kind of a bold psychonaut willing to do crazy things, but you've gone so much far beyond. Have you always been that type of person? Was there something about this protocol that just you trusted? Like, how did you land there?
Yeah. Well, I was trained as a philosopher. I had a deep passion for knowing. I was trained initially. I was studying to be a priest when I was in high school and 1 year of college. Celibacy and I eventually didn't get along together. This was in a Catholic tradition. I always had an intense desire to understand the structure of reality, the deep structure. I really wanted to understand a world of suffering. And I finished my graduate school as an agnostic. Just, I studied my way out of religion altogether. But I had a passion to learn. And when I saw this method that Stan had developed over 15 years, 20 years, I saw it as not only a psychological assistant. By amplifying the unconscious, your personal pains come forward and can be addressed and healed. But I saw it as a philosophical method. This is a way of working systematically that allows us to engage deeper and deeper levels of one's consciousness until eventually crossing levels, entering into larger bandwidths of consciousness systematically gathering the experiences, holding them, digesting them, opening up again. How far could it go? How far can it go? How big is the universe? So I just had this passion to take it as far as I could. And that happened to be 73 sessions. I worked at 500 to 600 micrograms. And I was a fool to do it like that. I would eat differently today.
How would you do it differently today? Would you start slowly with the dosing and work your way up to that point, or would you not go there at all?
I would go there, but I would go there more punctuatedly, in a more punctuated manner. I would work with lower doses. I would balance psilocybin, for example, or ayahuasca with LSD. They each have different properties and how they influence. I would be working in a way to make sure that I was integrating more as I went. And I always did that, but I think if I had worked with more varied doses, I might not have gotten as far in the end, but I think I would have been more stable with where I got than I was doing it the way I did, because doing it the way I did took me so deeply into the ecstasy of the divine light that is the source of all reality. Coming out of that and trying to return to a normal life with those overwhelmingly magnificent cosmic memories, it turned out that that was a lot harder to hold than I had anticipated. Yeah.
Can you give me some, and you know, my clients, some advice? I mean, so what I do is I don't ever administer anything, but I help people prepare for the experience. And then afterwards, most of what I do is helping them integrate the experience.
Yeah.
And so preparation for me is, you know, everything from philosophical study to diet to physical health, but also very much, you know, meditation, breath work, learning how to navigate your inner world, having tools you can apply in the experience. And then coming out, it's very much making sense of what happened. And then looking for messages from, you know, your soul or some collective higher being or some, whatever it is, that will show you how to live differently. And I know you suffered immensely hiding this. And so I'm curious, did you feel like preparation and integration were something that you could advise other people to do better? And if so, how?
What you just described is an excellent description of the approach I took. Basically, I call them sessions, but in Japanese, the meditation period is a sesshin.
Yeah.
And I think of these as sesshin, periods of intense spiritual practice where you prepare yourself physically, diet-wise. I would make sure my spine was properly aligned going in, yoga, meditation. And I think I always was meditating during all of my sessions, during all of the years that I was doing the sessions. And so the training of meditation, how to watch and observe without getting involved, and what happens when content comes up and you're just held in awareness, what happens to it. All those are very useful tools to take into psychedelic space. And so certainly the day of a session, centering, really the fundamental question is that depending on how you're working, but is it a good day to die? Are you willing to die today? You know, you have to really measure what you're willing to put up on any session. Sometimes it's not a good day to die. Sometimes it's a good day just to flex and not shatter the limits. And then you're right. Then I completely submit myself to whatever emerges. I let it take me wherever it wants to go, with or without comprehension. I just go into the experience, and then coming out of the experience, taking advantage of the long tail that LSD gives you, longer than others, but all of them give you a tail of processing your experiences, beginning to put it together, and learning how to describe things that you don't understand. I think that's one of the arts. There's parts you do understand, then there's other things you don't understand, but you will understand them later, probably when more light is thrown on those experiences. So I think what you described is very much how I work.
One of the things that I think comes up for people that aren't as familiar with psychedelic experience is the trustworthiness of psychedelic experience. And you engaged in a lovely dialogue with the near-death experience expert, Kenneth Ring, that I'll link to in our show notes.
Yeah.
And he makes the point that, the broad arc of your vision was this this tortuous death and then this glorious rebirth into heavenly spaces. And he says that maybe that's just cultural conditioning, that, we are so embedded in the Christian context that is the archetypal arc that we are, the water that we're swimming in. You said that actually, even as an expert in religious studies, you were surprised by a lot of the information that came to you. I'd be very interested by what you mean by that, and also how you would respond to people that push back on the trustworthiness of your experience.
Yeah. I think it's a really important question. And the first time I addressed this was in Dark Night, Early Dawn, in the first chapter, when I was describing the methodology that I was going to be introducing in the book. And I have a section called The Epistemic Value of Psychedelic Experience. And this kind of a technical discussion. How can we trust these experiences? Why do we think they're trustworthy? And I point to several pieces of evidence. One is sometimes we do discover things which can be tested in time and space, that you see somebody doing something, you see something taking place, you can verify that happens. Sometimes you learn something that you had no idea about, and you can verify through medicine or anthropology that these things are true. But I think it's something like, and I don't remember the author, forgive me, of a doctor who studied near-death experiences in cardiac arrest patients. And he wanted to disprove these. He was really upset at the metaphysical claims coming out of these experiences. So he differentiated between the nearby near-death experience and the transcendent. And he hypothesized, if we can verify the nearby reports, it doesn't prove, but it gives us extra credibility to the transcendent aspects. I think we can take the same approach to psychedelic experiences. One of the key issues is, are these experiences replicable? If you take two people from very different cultural backgrounds and use the same protocol, are they going to experience the same thing? And what we find is that in the early stages, no, they're not experiencing the same thing, because they're coming at it from different cultural and personal histories, and those are being turned off. But once you come through certain death protocols, once you go through the ego death, there's a striking similarity in the world which they encounter. Now, they encounter the world in different depths and taking different steps, but there is a fundamental ontological convergence that emerges in the experience. So what one person's experiences is, of course, always fallible and never to be put too much weight on. But if there is a congruence between many people's experience, I think it ups credibility. In the end, however, it's about experience. And it's not as much about the cognitive ideas, but in terms of the credibility, there is a depth of experience which is deeper than human sensate experience. It's clear when you were in it that this is a meta paradigm state. This is a meta state. This is a state which is more real than time-space is, moving into these places. Now, working within time and space, we find it. That's ridiculous. That's a hallucination. It has to be a hallucination. But the people who actually go there understand, and they understand the cosmology, that time-space is a manifested reality. And there is a manifesting reality behind time and space, within time and space. And we tap into it in all sorts of ways, not just psychedelics. The cosmology that emerged in my sessions was essentially identical with the cosmologies that emerge in the great mystical traditions, so there's nothing new. It's just a different way of entering into that world.
One of the things I wanted to really hammer down on was reincarnation. That you described your way in, like mine, was Dr. Stevenson's work at UVA, and I think you and I both believe that the more widespread belief in reincarnation is truly a linchpin for the paradigm shift in consciousness away from kind of nihilistic materialism. But one of the things you said in the book that I wanted to get a little bit more detail on is also this idea that I think comes from Newton's Journey of Souls, that there is this aspect of pre-incarnative choice where you decide on your curriculum before you go to Earth School. Clearly there were correspondences with the interviews, but I just wanted to know what they were in your direct experience.
Um, I think it's something like kindergarten through graduate school. We don't let the kiddies have much of a choice in their incarnation. We give them a lot of structure, but the older you get, the more choice you have in shaping your curriculum. I think it's something like that with souls too. So that by this time, I think that we can assume that most of the people here have had enough lives that they go through this process of choosing their incarnation. And reincarnation is so fundamental to me. The first book I wrote was on reincarnation because it seemed like your worldview is divided. If you believed in only one time through, you go here. If you believe in reincarnation, you're going there. It's just that you move in different directions. So to me, I think you're right, Tom, Devin, this is simply a fact of nature. We've proven it. We've demonstrated it in every imaginable way. Former life memories come up inside of us. When we heal them, we heal ourselves. There are positive, nurturing lives that we carry within us. When we draw on them, we get stronger. We are able to receive and understand more. For me, one of the ways this manifested in my work was having former life memories come forward spontaneously with specific people in my life, and in a very healing way, healing that relationship, healing the wound, a wound that was carried in that incarnation. In another way, I came to learn my life. I experienced my life, what my purpose was, what my choice was. These things kind of unfold, kind of in time, because sometimes it's not good for us to know too much in the beginning. But eventually, if you go in so many times, so deeply, you see what the purpose of your life was. You feel it more consciously. It's not buried unconsciously. It merges into you. And I believe that my life really was about doing this psychedelic work. It really was about learning to navigate the intense inner canyons and profound spaces that this work can take you into. And to understand some of the warp and woof of the universe. That's
I believe you said you were able to work with past lives via hypnotism as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is there a specific past life that you'd be willing or able to talk about so we could get a sense of what this work looks like?
Well, during the 6-year hiatus, when I wasn't doing psychedelics, I was doing past life therapy for 3 years, hypnotic kind of work. I uncovered about a dozen lives, worked with them. Some of them were just kind of my understanding of the soul. The soul may have hundreds of lives incorporated into its being, but not all of those hundreds of lives would manifest in me. There's a much smaller, it's like playing cards. You get only some of the cards from the deck, and that's your hand. And some of these former lives converge into me, and that's my hand. I didn't find anyone significant at that time. I found a Chinese merchant. I found an Irish barmaid. I found an Indian fighter. I found a brave, an Indian who fought with cochise. I found a priest on the southwestern United States who seemed to be one of the seed catalysts for my driving passion to understand, because he was a priest who ministered to a ring of parishes, and these were suffering peasants who were being, brutalized by their overlords, and their life was hard. And this priest believed in a loving God and he could never answer the people's question, why am I suffering? Why is there so much suffering? And I think that his frustration there and the conflict in his commitments and what he was seeing was part of what drove me to really understand. I wanted to understand the structure of the world so that there can be so much exponential growth, and yet such hard times, periods that people go through, One former life I found had a very deep effect on me. I found a Native American old man who was the seer for his tribe. He was a visionary. He was a shaman, and he was living outside of a camp. And I learned that it is his comfortableness with working with peyote and medicines of his period that made me comfortable with it, that allowed me to understand. So it was his life that laid the foundation for my psychedelic practice.
It's unbelievable. So that leads me into the question of suffering. But in one of your other interviews, I heard you say something to the effect that the purpose and the role of the individual in this process and these repeated rebirths is to become energetically stronger so that they can perceive more and more of the universe more and more accurately. Is that a correct interpretation?
Well, that was my passion, but there are different people who bring different hearts and minds to the engagement. You're engaging infinite potential, infinite knowledge. So your being is like your being, it's a catalyst, and it catalyzes something out of this infinite potential. And then if you keep at it, the catalyst you keep changing, it keeps evoking different experiences. Someone who has a passion for music, who has a passion for creativity or a passion for art, they might evoke different potentials. Right? My passion was to try to understand the deep structure of reality. And I've come to maybe appreciate a little bit more that passion was a distinctive seed catalyst that evoked these distinctive experiences out of it. But the reality that people engage is so much larger than any one person's experience of it. It's infinite potential, infinite knowledge, just infinite energy and capacity. How much can you take in? Well, what are you willing to pay? How much purification are you willing to go through in order to free your mind to be able to travel at those bandwidths of reality?
And do you believe that you can achieve very high transcendent states without suffering? Some people seem to just wake up.
Mhm. Yeah.
What is that past life work that just blossoms in this life, or is there a shortcut?
Well, there may be shortcuts, but I think a lot of it is where people are in their incarnational history. Teresa of Avila, one of my favorite saints, and she suffered a dark night of the soul that lasted over 20 years, just suffered terribly, and eventually blossomed in a profound mystical realization. Teresa of Lisieux popped into mystical realization when she was 15, 16 years old. She just popped into it. So I assume that people are at different stages, going through these boundaries. But I want to emphasize that what I found to be, I didn't understand it in the beginning, but what I found to be my work was not popping the bubble of ego and entering into discovering transcendence. That wasn't my project. My project was what I now call cosmological exploration, exploring deeper into the universe and coming back with an understanding, going out into the universe, coming back with an understanding. It's a different project to stand centered in reality and want to, through the focusing of your awareness, enter into the transparent condition where all the thought of small things just fall away and the life of the large thing emerges. That's what I think we think of as enlightenment, think of as spiritual awakening. And psychedelics can help you with that, I think. But if I were using psychedelics to achieve that specific thing, I would have done it differently. I would have worked with low doses and worked with meditative states and worked kind of more on the meditative side of things, using psychedelics to open up some. What I did was different, just smashing the structure, just blowing the mind apart radically, just seeing how far the bubble could go. And it's dying. I think of it as not dying to successive levels of ego. I think there is dying which takes place at the egoic level, and that's transcending your time-space identity. And then you're in subtle level reality. Subtle level reality is kind of like the girders of the universe. They're the backbones, the hidden structure. It's kind of like if the being, if we were in a condominium, high-rise condominium, and we're in rooms, the subtle level reality is the steel girders that hold the building in place. It's how things work at the collective level. When that falls away, that's a very different death than ego death. There was a time for me after going through the subtle level reality, coming to a point where that combustion and it fell away. And with it, all of human history fell away from my mind. All of the stories we've been telling ourselves and all of the libraries with all of the philosophies fell away. And I entered into a level of awareness that was transhuman. And I don't like that word, but beyond the human morphic, the human field, the human species mind. To die as an individual is a distinctive experience. To die as a species, to die letting go all the cognitive structures that are coming to your capacity with the species, it's a different kind of death. It was then I entered into archetypal reality, into a deeper structural level. And after a time at that level, another kind of death that took me into a higher tier of reality. My understanding is that each level of reality operates at a higher frequency. It's kind of like those 110, 240, 880, whatever. And in order to have coherent experience at that level, you have to allow your body to go through a process of literally kind of reworking your energy. When I talk about detoxification and purification, these are not like personal, unconscious, getting out the muck of the personal shadow. It's a very different process. It's kind of like learning how to sit on top of a volcano and let that energy run through you and blow your entire system so that you can then move into a state where you can stay conscious at that level of reality for hours at a time. A lot of people have contact with these levels of reality, but it's kind of like short, illuminating, like a lightning in a dark desert. Or they have contact, but it's not long enough to be able to draw it in and hold it and use it. And that's why, to me, this is a new philosophical method.
You spoke about being comfortable with incoherence. And I feel like that was a really important point. People black out or pull back or tense up when things don't make sense, when it becomes incoherent, but you seem to have some ability to just witness that and allow it and trust that maybe later it would make sense, or even if it doesn't, it's somehow still valuable.
Yeah. I found that pain was a limit. You have to be willing to experience pain. Incoherence was, to me, a deeper letting go. I mean, this is what your whole sanity is on the line. You're going into deeper and deeper states of just it not making sense. It's not making sense. Incoherence. And then eventually that dissolves, whatever it is, whatever it was, it dissolves, and your mind opens to a radically expanded experience of reality.
And did going through all of this perinatal, all of the burning off of karma, did you feel like that translated into your average day-to-day waking experience? Was being able to hold a deeper truth of reality directly showing up in your life?
It was. I've been a teacher of religious studies and comparative mysticism and Buddhism and psychology of religion all my life. So I naturally was reading in those fields. My mind traveled in those waters. And it did change me. It changed me. It made me a better father. Changed me, but more slowly than I would have liked. I think it continues to change me, and I think it will continue to change my next incarnation. What I found is that integration is a tricky thing. And I think as long as we're talking about integrating things out of the personal level of reality, we have an understanding of how that works. We have therapeutic models for that. if it's spiritual levels of reality, if you're getting into the experiences of that, we still have models for what that looks like in our mystical traditions and our spiritual guidance. But when you go into the radically deep waters of the psyche, when you get into territory which only the most devoted spiritual beings have access to, but even to touch it for hours at a time, I really question even what it means. How is it possible to integrate states like that into my life? And how do you integrate states of timelessness into time consciousness? You remember it, you may paint it, you write it, describe it. It may change how you view the world. But integrating those experiences to become a being who can live in an abiding way, even near those realities, that's a multiple lifetime, I think, agenda. Yeah.
Do you have much experience with extroverted psychedelic doses? I've done a lot of work eyes closed inward using music and meditation, but I've also run around in the woods and played with friends. And for me, that's been a very helpful form of integration and embodiment. I'm curious if you thought about that or played with it.
As I can understand what you're talking about, that makes a lot of sense to me. I have done some psychedelics in nature, lighter doses, just letting nature come alive in that way. After this came after my journey work, so my mind was already pretty porous from all that work. Playing in nature, well, that would be fun, wouldn't it? I think that could be really good for the body. Yeah.
So to return to your explorations, those 5 concentric circles you describe of personal mind, collective mind, archetypal mind, causal mind, where you had this experience of oneness. But then you talk about, I believe, final 4 sessions of the diamond luminosity, which is a central theme of your book. Could you just describe that as best as you can for listeners? Yeah.
Well, I'd already gone through these 4 layers. I'd entered into causal reality. I'd been given 4 incredible gifts at that level, just deep spiritual gifts, deep understandings. It gave me a deeper understanding of where reincarnation is taking humanity. I was as satisfied as any philosopher could be. And yet there was still 5 years of the work of the journey ahead. And that's when I went through yet another death and rebirth. And when I came through it, I awoke, I came into a state of light, of clarity that was beyond. I mean, I had entered into light many times, but all of those times seemed almost like preparation for this time, because this was of a higher order of clarity. Light became invisible. It was such a high frequency, but the clarity was just stunning. And then your mind operates inside this hyper clarity, and it doesn't disturb it at all. And there's truly, touching it just once change your life forever. Just to know that it's there. And then the following session, detoxification, a lot of purification. 5 sessions later, about a year later, being taken into it again. A deeper experience of this reality. This is the 50th session, and I was going to be taken into it 2 more times over the next 3 years. But something happened in the 50th session that changed my understanding of what the whole project was. I was deep in the hyperclarity of diamond luminosity towards the end of the session. And all of a sudden, a part of my visual field opened and turned 90 degrees, and I saw a reality of light far, far in the distance. It had a galactic kind of quality, and a beam of that light came and hit me, and it completely stumped me and shattered me. And I was in the diamond luminosity consciousness at the time, and I called it the absolute light, but what it showed me was even though the diamond luminosity felt like the homecoming of homecomings, there had been many homecomings, it just felt like, can't get better than this. Even then, I learned that there are deeper and deeper dimensions of reality beyond even where I had reached. And that's when I learned that I had made a false assumption. I had made an assumption that eventually you get to an endpoint, some endpoint of the journey that is culmination, brings peace, brings enlightenment, brings, and what I learned was, no, that's not the way it works. You can stop anywhere along the way. You can take the blessings that are given you at any part along the way, take them and live with them and be enriched by them. But it's an infinite progression. You'll never get to the end of it. And that's why one of the reasons I'd be gentler with myself. I've learned that it's not about getting somewhere. It's about changing the porosity of the membrane between you and physical reality and spiritual reality. And it's becoming wiser and letting more of the energy of spiritual reality into your life, which can be done gently, physically, psychedelically, therapeutically. It's not about getting somewhere. I got about as far as I've seen anybody get. And great respect for the masters who actually live in communion with those levels of reality.
At some of the lower, subtler levels, it's been my experience that as I think burn off some of my conditioning, which filtered reality, I became highly intuitive, and I would even say psychic. And I had experiences that I verified on psychedelics, which then allowed me to have similar experiences in meditation, in dreams, and just walking around. And you talked about the magic in the classroom, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how this happened for you.
Yeah. Well, I was in an interesting test circumstance, wasn't I? I was doing this massive journey privately, and I was teaching surrounded by people all week long. But I couldn't tell them about my work. I could even talk about psychedelics, but I couldn't talk about my use of psychedelics. And so I had years and years of students going through my classes and taking courses with me for a number of years, intro, intermediate, advanced courses. And I found that the oneness that I was experiencing in my psychedelic sessions, the truth, the fundamental truth of oneness, permutations of oneness, somehow opened up aspects of my own personalized version of that, tapping into that oneness. And my students' minds began to enter into my mind, and I would be reaching for an example just to make a point, and I would give an example that I just made up. The student would come up after class and say, it's interesting that you would use that example because that's exactly what happened to me this week. And this happened over and over and over again. And then I began to realize that they were having sometimes very deep experiences around certain, we would say, mystical concepts that I was presenting, just in teaching Hinduism, teaching Atman is Brahman, teaching the Atman self, teaching Buddhism, teaching emptiness, shunyata, emptiness of self, and just describing some of these concepts. And they were having very deep experiences of these realities. And it was as if the fact that to some degree I had the memory of these experiences living within me, it created a field which activated their potential to awaken into these experiences. I felt like I was a lightning rod in the middle of a unified field. And some of the things I was saying were hitting students in very, very deep places. Some of these examples were really deep wounds that they were carrying, deep questions that they had been carrying for years. And I had my students do a lot of writing in my courses. So I got the backstory of their working with these various ideas. So it was as if my classroom was demonstrating a fundamental truth that I learned in the sessions, and that is states of consciousness are contagious. Clarified states of consciousness are contagious. Anger and destructive states of consciousness are contagious. There's a field of around us that's We radiate, we are part of this field, and experience radiates out 360 degrees. I also learned that there are fields in the classroom. There is a class field which influences individual students, and I can feel it. It influences me. And then I learned that there is a course field, which is a deeper field, which is composed like a morphic field of all the students learning who have ever studied this material with me over time. So the class field are the present students, but the course field is a field which surrounds a person's activity in the world. If I were a surgeon, it would be a surgical field. If I were a coach, it'd be a performance excellence kind of field. I'm a teacher. It's an education field. So that the learning of my past students creates an energized context through which new students learn, and they learn certain things faster. And they because of the course field, they want to start at more advanced levels of the discussion. And I found I had to revise my courses periodically in order to keep up with these pivots that my students were making. And it could be just, cultural norms and the socialization that takes place internally to classes around faculty. But I think it's more than that. I think that the unified universe that we see in our sessions, that the unification, the fundamental truth of non-duality, the truth of individuality extended through reincarnation, but not an isolated individuality, an open, interfacing, interconnected individuality that's in conscious exchange with its environment through time. All of that, just knowing that, just living that, putting it in a quiet place, it bubbles up around you. Things happen. And that's what I call the magic. And the magic is when porosity happens. It's like, and I developed a way of teaching I'd call quantum pedagogy in my book, The Living Classroom. It's a way of teaching which not only affirms the truth of individual minds, that's atomistic pedagogy, but it also affirms the underlying truth of wholeness that holds those individual minds, that is their substance. Yeah.
You described the soul as kind of an integration system for all of our past lives and experiences, but also in the context of the future human, it seems to me like we're all kind of being pulled together towards a collective mind where we maintain our individuality. And it seems in microcosm, that's what you're describing in the magic you saw in your classroom. Is that how we should think about the future human as it's manifesting?
In all of our science fiction, whenever this unitive consciousness pokes up, it turns human beings into automatons. It takes away their individuality. The Borg assimilates us all. It's the only way we can think of it. But really, when a field consciousness emerges, it wakes us up. It's a higher field. It's a connective field. It lifts our individual potential. Sometimes in a very highly energized room, I would copy down the blackboard at the end of class because I learned things. I saw things more clearly under this influence, right? So it's a field that potentiates individual consciousness. Now, to me, I have an image in my mind of interacting fields which cross in the individual, which the broader the field and the deeper the field, the more it influences an individual's energy, and one lives in that field in a way. I think in some ways, I used to think of the bardo as an obstacle. I want to get through the bardo and get to the divine realm. Now I think of the bardo as kind of a security blanket. It keeps us safe while our individuality is getting stronger and stronger with practice, more reincarnation, getting stronger, clearer, more compassionate, more intelligent, more understanding. If you touch the divine light, or the divine radiance, without having a very strong, clear field, it shatters. It just shatters you. It's like an overload. You can't even remember it. You can't put words around it. But if you have done your homework in a way and you enter into that field and can hold the position of merger with that field, but it's not a merger that eliminates the center. It's a merger that nourishes and expands and draws on the center. I think something like that must be like reincarnation. We work our way through deeper, we come what Monroe calls a last timer or the outer ring. And then we enter dimensions of light that are the light that sustains the universe. It takes a lot of inner strength and inner work to sustain the encounter. And I think that's just probably just the tips of the robes of this reality. Just the tips of, you're grabbing light, and it's just the tips of the edges. I think sometimes I've had visions of the universe, the great mother, holding its child, humanity, loving its child, and not able to touch it, because if it touched it, the power of its love sends the child into screaming pain, because so much love, so much energy, so fast is more than it can handle. And I think humanity is in the arms of the universe, and the universe is growing this child of humanity. And we're coming into a time where I think some integration and synthesis of all of our former lives is taking place. We're kind of wrapping our lives together, and the lives that manifest first are maybe the lives that need the most help, the lives that are carrying the most pain. So therapy, healing, former lives takes forefront. But in my experience, there comes a point when all of these lives are brought together and integrated, and they become one. In my experience, when they became one, there was an explosion of light, of diamond light from my chest. I was catapulted into a level beyond any level I had gotten into up at that point in time. And I was an individual, but I was an individual beyond any frame of reference I'd ever known before. And then only over time came back in. I have had experiences that fuse the idea, the understanding that humanity is coming to a crescendo. Humanity is coming to a crescendo of a spiritual journey that's been going on for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. We're giving birth to the next iteration of the human species. We're giving birth to the next form of humanity. What is that form? What will it be? And I think the form is apparent in our past. We've been gestating this future human for thousands of incarnations, hundreds and hundreds of incarnations. Now we are experiencing the labor, which is a dangerous time, a painful time, but a labor of giving birth to the integrated soul into history, so that by the time humanity makes this pivot, and I don't think it's going to be a fast pivot, I think it's going to be generational kind of pivot. The blueprint, the archetypal structure, the substructure of the human psyche, the collective psyche will have shifted, the blueprint will have shifted, and the soul will find more natural anchor. We will exist as human beings, as souls, with all of our knowledge intact. And of course, that means extraordinary compassion, because we have been all the people in the world. We have been all the races, and we have a felt sense of relationship with not just our immediate family, but hundreds and thousands of beings in the world. So it's an awakening, I think, of oneness that leads to community. And it's awakening of oneness that leads to deeper transparency with the surrounding intelligence, the total intelligence. So I think we're entering that time. My visions that were given to me, I had no control over what was given to me, consistently showed humanity coming into what you might call a dark night of our collective soul. The dark night is a time of purification. And I think in a sense, all the evils, all the toxins of history are being purged in this Kali Yuga time. All the hatreds, all the animosities, all the...
Do you see this as a phase shift that sweeps everyone up with it? Or I think a lot of listeners are familiar with different developmental models like integral or spiral dynamics, where everybody's born at stage 0 and they work, or stage 1, and they work their way up. And there's a leading edge, shout out to this community, of people who are pushing into new boundaries. But it does, and that has some kind of collective consciousness impact, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone goes with it. Do you think this is more of a all-inclusive phase shift?
I understand what you're talking about, and there are certain thinkers who think that humanity is dividing, that those who can follow the ascending energy can make the pivot. They'll go in one direction. The ones who can't, they'll be taken care of, but they're going to be taken care of on another planet. They're off planet. I hope that isn't true. I hope that we remain unified as a species. I hope the slow goers make the same jump forward. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a clarity on all the levels, how it's going to manifest, what's it going to be. Some of my experience towards the end of my session was going into what I call deep time. I'd been into expanded boundaries of time. And I went into the deepest states of deep time that I had ever been. It was an excruciating ordeal to get there, but I went into deep time and I experienced the archetypal form of the future human. The beauty, the wisdom, the magnificent intelligence and compassion of that being. I really believe that this is a species shift that we're trying to make. I don't understand how it's going to happen, but the guidance which gives to me over and over again is we are being helped from all sides. Nature is doing this. We're not doing this. We're riding it. Nature is doing this. Nature is much, much bigger and deeper than we are. We're going into a period of great pain and great suffering. My understanding is that the depth of this pain and the breadth of it touching all the people on the planet in varying ways activates reactions, responses, not just in the personal psyche, but within the collective psyche. It produces an instability of the field of the collective psyche. It takes the collective psyche in from a linear condition into nonlinear conditions. And we know something about how fields behave in nonlinear states. But when the human psyche is hyperstimulated by the depth of disruption and chaos that we're coming into, it creates the conditions that makes it more able to facilitate that creativity can come through. Catalytic conversions can happen in this highly aroused state. And the message was, this is going to happen much faster than we could ever think before. Much faster, much faster. And it was precisely because of the nonlinear conditions of arousal and those nonlinear conditions being engendered by pain and by novelty and confusion. There's a price to be paid. In this, we will be drawn deeper into the human heart, and we will be forced almost to rise to the occasion in a way that breaks the heart, breaks us open in a way that is permanent. The way that people get together on facing great tragedies, floods, earthquakes. But this is something which reaches so deeply that it permanently changes the tilt, something essential in the human psyche.
Can you say more about the heart? I've heard it said that primitive humans experienced the seat of consciousness to be in the belly when they were more instinctual, and we all tend to think we exist in the forehead. And some great spiritual adepts have described the seat of consciousness as moving down into the heart and life actually being experienced from that place. Does that make sense to you in your experience?
It makes sense in my experience. And here I just draw on chakra theory, the understanding of the 7 chakras, the 3rd chakra being the belly of the seat of power. The 4th chakra, the heart, is where compassion opens. It's when you begin to feel the great breadth of your being. It arises with the quest for justice, but then it emerges deeper into lives of compassion. And then, of course, there's the throat chakra of creativity, the brow chakra of the awakening of paranormal insight, the insights that go beyond physical senses, and the crown chakra is the experience of oneness. And all of these are all the way down to pleasure at the very bottom, in survival. All of these are all energetically connected. So naturally, when you open one, it not only opens the valve going, but it opens the valve going down. So I think what we're going through in some way, collectively, will be centered on the heart, because my understanding is, my experience is that we're coming into an awakening of the birth of oneness in the human heart. We're scientifically, we're seeing oneness everywhere we go, in fields, in quantum theory. But there is an awakening of oneness that allows us to open in compassion more, the feeling, the understanding that we really are in this together. We're all of this as one family. Once the heart is open, then we won't use weapons. Nature will be safe from us. Other people will be safe from us. We won't use our knowledge to destroy and expand at the expense of other beings. From here up, it starts with oneness. We're feeding into, drawing in energy, understanding that comes from above, opening up into paranormal dimensions of understanding, and culminating in this utterly natural, abiding awareness of the oneness that underlies all reality and is ever present, always has been, always will be, unchanging. It's there.
Dr. Bache, we come to the end of our time. And one of the things I loved is that, you waited 20 years in many ways to communicate and integrate these unbelievably intense mystical experiences. And what, if you could sort of sit on the other side of the screen and speak to someone that hasn't had the benefit of these experiences and probably desperately needs the insights that you accumulated, what would you say to the materialist or the nihilist or the relatively hopeless person in this situation who hasn't had the benefit of your direct experiences?
Well, read. There are books, and when you go deeply into the thoughts and ideas in the books, it activates you. I've taken students into near-death episode literature. I've been in Ken Ring's books for decades. And students, when they really take in the information deeply, it changes them. They begin to have different experiences. It changes them. If you take in the literature in psychedelics, if you take in the literature on non-ordinary experiences in general, it opens belief. It opens the understanding. It's good to be, one of the pillars of Buddhism is called Sangha, community, and it's good to be gathered with people who are seekers. That's what I understand leading edge to be. Community it helps us grow faster. We grow faster when we grow together, and I think that's taking place in different places. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Chris Bache, Devin Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm incredibly inspired by your message and hope we can help it reach more people.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Me as well.
Okay.